Hi, welcome. I'm David Boje, and I want to talk to you about the 7 Seeds of Leadership. It's a new book I'm putting out. I'm presenting it here, and I'm going to give you a short film after. So the 7 Seeds of Leadership starts with the root seed and the question, who are you? And going beneath to find that out. Second seed, the sacral seed. One of the chakras, yes. What is your substance? Before, go into the history of your substance. 3, your solar plexus, right? The power seed. When is your future arriving? What bets are you making on that future? 4 is your heart seed. Where is your place on earth in being in this world? 5, your throat, your voice as a leader. Where are you on earth in your becoming? 6, the third eye seed. With whom are you attracting relationships? Relations with others. I call it the between. 7, the crown. That energy, what are you wishing for beyond and for your soul, your spirit, your true self, what we call your true self in true storytelling. So let me give you a little bit of an analogy here. So when you're building a house, and let's say you're this 7 seeds, first you go to the root, the beneath. You check the foundation, right? Then the before, the sacral. You research the history of who lived in the neighborhood before. You're buying a new house, who lived in the house before? Are we respecting the original architecture or not? Then we go to bets, your solar plexus. You draw on blueprints and renovations, wagering what the house will look like. Then being in your heart. You spend time sitting in rooms, feeling the flow of light, the air. You check all the locations. You're present in all of them. Then you deal with becoming. Your throat, your voice, you begin to work, experimenting with designs. You're talking to people about the designs. You're talking to builders, and then you get to the third eye. This is right here. So that third eye. You invite neighbors and friends to help, creating a community spirit within the walls in the relationships with others. And you need that third eye to be intuitive and to be in touch with your true inner self. Finally, the beyond. You open the doors, turning the house into a shelter, a community center, not just for yourself, but serving your neighborhood. Maybe you got barbecues and other things, but this transcendence beyond the self to the spirit, your very soul, what I call the 3 S's. So that's what we're doing. We're taking a number of different areas and calling them leadership seeds, certain energies you start with. Who are you, right? What is your substance? When is your future arriving in your bets? Where is your place on earth? Why are you on earth? With whom are you attracting relationships, right? You attract relationships. And on the crown, what are you wishing for in your spirit, soul, and your true self? And these build on the principles of true storytelling, and you can spot each one of them. I'll explain it to you more. So enjoy the video. We appreciate you being here. Okay? Thank you so much. And go to growthod.org and you find more about it. You can book a session with me, right? I do keynotes all the time at conferences. So we got a new theory of leadership. It's organic. It's not that mechanistic stuff. So I hope you enjoy planting the seeds, cultivating them, watching them blossom. Thank
So,
you.
let's talk about leadership. For a long time, we've had this idea that it's all about climbing ladders, or unlocking doors, or getting to the top. But what if that whole way of thinking is wrong? Today, we're going on a journey to explore a totally different model. One where leadership isn't a machine to be operated, but a garden to be cultivated.
Right? For decades, we've been handed these mechanical models. Leadership is a machine, and if you just pull the right levers, you get the right outcome. The problem is that treats people like interchangeable parts, like cogs. This is where the source material we're looking at makes a really fundamental shift. It asks us to move from that rigid mechanical view to a living, organic one. So what happens when you stop trying to operate a machine and you start trying to cultivate a garden?
Okay, so if leadership really is a garden, then how do you tend it? Where do you even start? Well, that's exactly what the 7 Seeds framework is for. Think of it as our map for this journey of growth, one that's built on some really cool ideas from ancient wisdom and even modern storytelling. And here it is. This is the big picture, the core visual for our whole explainer. You can see how this is a journey upward, right? It starts down at the root, which is all about our core identity, and it grows all the way up to the crown, which is about a purpose that's bigger than ourselves. Each of these stages, each seed, is really just a powerful question a leader has to ask themselves. And this isn't some checklist you just power through. It's a living, breathing process of growth. So here's our plan. We've just looked at our map for growth. Next up, we're going to dig in and talk about planting your foundation. Then, we'll move on to finding your authentic voice, and then leading beyond yourself. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at this ultimate mindset shift, the leader as gardener. Now, to make this feel a little less abstract, the source material gives us this brilliant analogy of restoring an old house. It uses what it calls the 7 Bs as these practical lenses to see leadership. So, imagine you've got this old house. First, you look beneath the surface to check the foundation. That's your identity. Then you have to look at what came before, the history of the place. You make your bets on the future with new blueprints. You take time for being present, just sitting in the rooms to feel the flow. Then you start becoming. You actually begin the work. You build community between yourself and your neighbors. And finally, you reach beyond yourself to serve the whole neighborhood. Let's see how this works with the first few seeds. All right, so let's get to it. We're starting at the very beginning, planting our foundation. This is that deep, internal work that, it just has to happen first. You can't skip this part if you want anything real to grow. These first 3 seeds, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, this is all about that essential groundwork. They force us to ask, who are you? What is your substance? And when is your future arriving? Because think about it, you'd never build a skyscraper on a shaky foundation, right? Same principle applies here.
The very first seed, the root seed, asks the biggest question of all. Who are you? And we're not talking about your job title or your resume. This is about looking beneath all of those external labels. The core practice here is something called recharacterize. It's about actively questioning how the world has defined you. So, are you just a manager or are you really a mentor? It's about getting clear on your authentic identity first, as the absolute non-negotiable starting point for everything else. Next up is the sacral seed, which asks, what is your substance? This is all about looking before you got there, understanding the history, the origins, the stories that were already in motion. The key practice here is to externalize. This is so powerful. Instead of blaming people, you name the problem as an outside thing. So instead of, you're not communicating, you might say, wow, this communication breakdown is the real enemy here. It lets everyone attack the problem together without getting defensive, and it honors the history of what's going on. The third seed, the solar plexus, is all about your personal power and getting things moving. It asks a really provocative question. When is your future arriving? This forces you to get real about the bets you're making with your energy, your time, your resources. But here's the trick. To get other people to come along, you first have to sympathize. You have to genuinely understand why people are clinging to the old way of doing things. Change is scary. And only when you can truly respect where they're coming from can you start to build a future they're actually excited to be a part of. Okay, so once that deep foundation's solid, it's time to actually build on it. And this brings us to our next big phase, finding your authentic voice. This is where all that internal work starts to become external action. It's how you show up. The next 2 seeds, the heart and the throat, are all about how we connect our inner world to our outer impact. They ask us these really deep questions. Where is your place on Earth? And why are you on Earth? This is all about being fully present and finding what you're really here to do.
The heart seed asks, where is your place on Earth? And this is really about the power of being fully present. Not in the past, not in the future, but right here, right now. The practice is to revise, which means courageously letting go of old identities that just don't fit anymore. Maybe you have to let go of being the expert with all the answers so you can become a curious learner. When you do that, you start to master perfect timing. You just know when to speak up and when to be quiet.
And that flows right into the throat seed, which asks the really big one. Why are you on Earth? This is the journey of becoming, of always evolving. The practice here is to strategize by hunting for what the Source calls little wow moments. You know, that meeting that was surprisingly productive, or that small act of teamwork that just worked. These are little sparks of evidence that a better story is possible. And by finding them and highlighting them, you start to give voice to your purpose and experiment your way into a whole new narrative.
So we've done the internal work, we've found our voice, and now the journey expands outward. We're moving into the final and honestly the most exciting part of this framework, where the focus shifts from me to we and toward a purpose that's bigger than any one of us.
These final two seeds, the third eye and the crown, are where leadership becomes something truly special, almost transcendent. They ask, with whom are you attracting relations? And then, the ultimate question, what are you wishing for? At this point, it's not really about you anymore. It's all about the community you build and the greater good you're trying to serve.
The third eye seed exists in that invisible space between people. It asks, with whom are you attracting relations? The practice here is called restory. You take those little wow moments you found earlier, and you start weaving them together into a new story that you create with other people. Your job as a leader is no longer to be the main author. Instead, you're more like a stage designer. You create the environment, you set the conditions where healthy connections can happen, and a new, collective story can be born.
And that brings us all the way to the top, the crown seed. This is about reaching beyond your own needs. It asks, what are you wishing for? But not just for yourself, for the spirit, soul, and self of the entire system. This is the big shift from me to we. The practice is to publicize this new, healthier story you've all created. You build support, you create a coalition. Leadership here becomes a truly generative act, creating value that helps everyone flourish, not just a select few.
So, after that whole journey from root to crown, what's the big takeaway? Well, it all comes down to this one fundamental shift in how we see our role as leaders. Let's pull it all together with this one final powerful metaphor. I mean, look at the difference here. It's just night and day. The old mechanical leader is like an architect. They have a rigid blueprint, people are resources, and they build to a very specific, pre-planned height. But the new organic leader? They're a permaculturist, a gardener. They see the organization as a living, breathing ecosystem. They don't force growth, they just tend the soil. They honor the life in the system. And by doing that, they allow the entire forest to reach incredible heights the architect never even could have imagined.
And that's really the heart of it. Your role completely changes. You're no longer the hero who has to have all the answers. Instead, you become a steward. You become a gardener of the culture. And your main job is simply to tend to the conditions, to create the space where healthy, life-giving stories can sprout and grow, all on their own.
So as we wrap up our explainer, that leaves us with one final and I think really important question to sit with. Looking at this whole journey, from root all the way to crown, what's the very first seed that you need to plant, that you need to cultivate in your own leadership garden? Thinking about that? Well, that could change everything.